Welcome. Welcome to the East. I was just telling everyone there's lots of East Lansing people here, so I didn't say that. We're in Lansing, the Lansing Art Gallery and Education Center. I'm Michelle Carlson, the Executive Director, and I welcome you all here to our new space. I think many of you are here for the first time, so thank you. I hope you'll come back. We're a nonprofit agency. We've been around since 1965, so we have a long history in the community. And our mission is to provide public awareness, education, and enjoyment of the visual arts by promoting the works of Michigan artists, which we're going to do tonight with the beautiful work of the talented Zoe Beaudry. Yes. We'll get to hear from her in just a moment. I just wanted to welcome you all and encourage you to go upstairs and have some snacks and drinks, and we have an art project up there you can work on, mingle, and after the talk you can talk some more with Zoe. I also want to remind you that in November, when Zoe's show is done, we'll be having her holiday Michigan Made show, which is a lot of fun, so I hope you'll come back to that. And before we hear from Zoe, I want you all to congratulate her with me on her award. She is the recipient. She is the recipient of the Elizabeth Charles Award. Elizabeth Charles was an artist who passed away way too young, and she believed in the arts as a means to a deeper understanding of our humanity. This award celebrates our artists championing human equity and diversity as exemplified, as you can see in Zoe's work, and this is why she was awarded this award. Zoe will give you your certificate and award after you talk, so you don't have to hold that. So let's welcome Zoe, and Katrina Daniels, our exhibition director, will be moderating a conversation with her, and then we'll have time for questions after. And thanks for coming. Katrina.
Thank you all so much for coming. So I have some questions that I'm going to ask Zoe, kind of keep it, like a conversation. She's going to walk us through the exhibit a little bit, and then we will leave time for you all to ask questions. So thank you all so much for coming, and without further ado, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. So I'll just give a little summary to start. This show is called Wholly Integrated, and that phrase was taken from a sound clip you can listen to here. It's a conversation that I had with my mom about the process of giving birth, and wholly integrated was the feeling she described when her mind and body were one when she was giving birth. So a lot of my work is about the contrast between the mind and the body, moments where the mind and the body feel like one unit, and moments where we feel completely disconnected from our bodies. I'm always interested in looking for places where it doesn't make any sense to identify with the body, or the body doesn't just feel like a single unit anymore. So a lot of this work is speaking to some of those themes. Yeah. Do you have some questions?
I do. That's a beautiful introduction. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us, are you drawn to a particular theme before you get started, or is it a singular piece that creates the inspiration? Is it, for example, are you creating one piece that maybe a body of work then develops from, or are you thinking more holistically about that body of work before you start working?
It depends. Sometimes I'm running with a certain theme. So like with these pieces over here, for example, that have the light in them, I was trying to think of a way to represent the body so that it wasn't as much a discrete entity, but more of an avatar or a receiver receiving a signal, or a portal to something else. That was the concept, and I came up with 5 different figurative images to represent that concept. Other times, a good friend calls me when she's in labor, in between contractions, and she asks if I'll paint a picture of her labor. And so that's how we end up with something like this. So sometimes it's the event that inspires the image, and sometimes it's more a broader concept that I'm working with. But they're all based around that same theme of identifying with the body or not.
Sometimes art is imitating life in this example.
Exactly.
I'm wondering if you could kind of speak a little bit to this beautiful piece here, this mandala that is sort of an anchor in this exhibit.
Absolutely. This piece is meant to imitate both a mandala, which is usually created with concentric circles, and also browser windows, hence the arrow, the icons up at the top. So it's supposed to have like a spiritual undertone to it, but make the viewer question whether we're worshiping the divine or God or the internet, or whether those are the same thing. So this man here is at once meant to be somewhat like the Buddha, reaching enlightenment in front of the Bodhi tree. And these are butts, but they're also lotus flowers down here, in case anyone was wondering. And then he's also meant to look a little bit like an angel figure with the wing at the top. So the mandala was just a way of layering these different ideas on top of each other, both compositionally and also conceptually. The dial is at the center of the painting, so it's supposed to kind of anchor the concentric composition in a way.
I know a few folks have been curious if you are painting from life or if you're painting from photographs.
I am almost always painting from photographs. Most of them are reference photos that I took. Some of them are models that I worked with at a distance, like this person is a professional art model, and I sent him a directive and he sent me back some photos, but most of them are photo shoots. Obviously I did not take that picture, but they're all the figurative work is done from photos.
Can you talk about what is stimulating your creativity and how do you remain motivated and inspired?
I think I'm always the most inspired by people. I think that when I move through the world, I'm not very often looking at the objects or the architecture of the world around me. I'm much more focused on people and their faces and their bodies and their body language. And moments when I can tap into my own embodied presence are very inspiring to me. So seeing myself mirrored in others, trying to, in moments like this especially, help other people see themselves mirrored in me, or see a bit of vulnerability and then feel that in themselves, those are the things that make me feel most inspired.
So thinking and kind of reflecting on that idea about being inspired by people, there is a silhouette portrait that is hanging to the right of the mandala, and I know that is inspired by someone who is very close to you. Can you speak a little bit more on that?
Yes, so there are a lot of themes of both motherhood and then also the idea of pregnancy and birth, which not necessarily the same thing, but very closely related. So I painted a portrait of my own mom a few years ago. It was her face, really large. And then after that, I made this companion piece here, which is the same image, but she's missing. So the first one was called Looking the Future in the Eye, and this one is called Looking the Void in the Eye. So it was kind of about the idea of the way that we become our parents as we get older, and then maybe what happens when they're gone a little bit. Just as birth is a place where the body isn't really a very good container for the self, death is the same. Consciousness is gone, but the body remains. So I think about birth and death as these bookends that really parallel each other in a way that I'm interested in. So.
And it sounds like you're exploring this idea of transitions. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah. The idea of emergence or dissipation, things like that. And I think in a lot of the work that's here, you'll see bodies or figures that are missing, that are emerging, that are somehow permeable, or that are somehow connected. And yeah, emergence is a big part of that for sure.
There is a sound piece that we have that's behind you that you had mentioned that is a conversation between you and your mom.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Where did that idea come from? Just expand on that a little bit.
Sure. I was curious about the experience of giving birth. I don't think it's something that I'm ever going to do myself, which is part of my fascination with it. But I wanted to know firsthand what that felt like to be embodied in that moment, and who better to ask than my mom. And the way she talked about it really shocked me. I thought it might be just kind of a like off the cuff, either cavalier story or maybe a sentimental story, but the way that she told it, I thought was actually just incredibly poetic and powerful. And the way she described feeling like her mind and body were one for the first time in her life at that moment kind of confirmed to me that my conceptual interest in the idea of birth is something that I wanted to pursue more and talk to more moms and expecting moms about.
I encourage everyone to take a listen. It is a really powerful piece. And I know you've been working on this body of work for some time. I was having a conversation with somebody here in our audience, and when I talked a little bit about some of the themes in your work, they immediately said how poignant this idea of birth is right now. And how this is such a topic that feels just so resonant. And I'm wondering if you thought about that at all, or if it was just sort of how this body of work happened to align with that.
Well, I'm usually thinking about birth in sort of a metaphorical or existential sense. Like, for example, the Buddhist concept of rebirth and death is like a cycle, and it doesn't always necessarily mean physical birth and physical death, but also the birth and death of ideas, the birth and death of different types of suffering, which is apparently all we do in life, according to Buddhists. But then, yes, of course, the piece over here on the left of the pregnant woman is called To Relate Freely, and I titled it that way because I think being able to relate freely to people and have control over what we do with our bodies is extremely important, and it's something that is threatened right now. So that's very much on my mind as well.
And then since we were talking about or referencing this piece, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about the installation of putting light into your work, which I think is not something that we often see in 2D work.
Yeah, absolutely. The light was a way of trying to capture the idea that our bodies are not like this untouchable, solid, isolating encapsulation of the individual self, but rather there's something that can be affected by the energy around them, and vice versa. I wanted the light from that light to shine out of a body and onto the person viewing the painting, so that in that way they're connected. And also for it to look a little translucent, as if you could almost peer inside this person. Not necessarily like looking through their skin, but more looking into their energy. There were 7 of these paintings, and the lights were placed along the 7 chakras of the body. And each painting was thematically correlated to the chakras, which are energy centers in the body, in case anyone doesn't know about them.
Thank you. There's this collection of these 2 pieces over here where you're seeing just sort of a peek of these faces, with this this white background. Can you talk a little bit about why you made that choice compositionally?
Yeah, these pieces are very much about the emergence that you were talking about. I see them also in conversation with the one far over here, where there's just an eye that's concealed by an object in front of it. And I was thinking pretty literally about the eyes, this person's perception, still being present, and yet the body is not. So I was playing with ways to visually represent that. There's perception there, but the body is not present.
And I think we often hear about the eyes sort of being like, I know this sounds very trite, but like the window to the soul.
Oh yeah.
You know, and being, but really is something that conveys a lot of emotion. And yeah, it feels like they're almost coming out of those pieces.
Totally, and they're, one is pretty happy looking, the other one looks, I guess I don't want to put a label on it, but I feel like there's definitely the person on the right is smiling, the person on the left looks questioning.
Yeah, sort of pensive. I know not everyone's going to be able to see this piece, but of course we'll have opportunities after the talk. So can you talk a little bit about this piece with these two bodies that are intertwined? And then there is a background it's a black background with white dots behind these two figures.
Yes, so that is a new direction that I'm hoping to go, because I've been making all this work for years that's about the desire to transcend the body and the desire to connect, but I've never actually painted two people interacting until very recently, which is interesting because I find the idea of being isolated alone in your body so disturbing, and yet here I am isolating people over and over. So this painting is of two people cuddling, hugging around each other like this, and I wanted to see what that would feel like to represent an interaction that is so overt, and there's like skin on skin contact. Really, that one I think is not that deep. I just wanted to make a painting about cuddling, so.
Okay, my next question was going to be something about being like the voyeur into this intimate experience, but maybe I'm just like reading too much into it.
No, that's absolutely right too, actually, because I did do a photo shoot with a couple for that painting, and that was very different from doing a photo shoot with a single model, and it was great. There were a lot more smiles, and it was sweet. So that's part of it too, for sure.
It's a beautiful piece. So I could talk to you so much more, but I know that I'm sure some of our audience members have questions, so I want to make sure that we have opportunities. Does anyone have a question for the artist?
I want to give you a compliment as an old labor and delivery and OBGYN nurse. You did a great job with the pregnant photo. Whether you're aware or not, you did a great job of depicting the increased melanin that happens in a woman's body during pregnancy. Plus, the light, where the light is exactly where I would put a fetoscope to listen to the heartbeat.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
So that light was very significant for me in that way. That's exactly where I put a fetoscope to listen to the heartbeat.
That's so wonderful. Thank you
did
so
a
much for
beautiful
sharing.
job. Thank you, thank you, thank
Thank
you.
you. Appreciate that.
On the topic of that image, I'm curious, you said that there were 7 pieces in all. How did you land on these 2 chakra pieces for this entire composition?
Well, I felt like the theme of this show is going to be birth and rebirth, motherhood to some extent, so the one on the left felt perfectly aligned. This one on the right involves the throat center, the throat chakra, which is often considered to be about self-expression. And I was thinking about the birth of ideas and the birth of concepts. It's also a self-portrait. So it felt relevant to me in that way. I also chose to pose in that way because I was already thinking about the birth of whatever I wanted to bring into the world. So, yeah.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, right over here.
Hi Zoe, this is beautiful work. I noticed that the majority of the paintings are done in oil. Like we have like one or two that are in acrylic. Is there a reason why you prefer oil?
I prefer oil. Gosh, I don't know how to say it, but I like the depth and the richness of the colors, the materiality of the paint. I think it does things that acrylic can't do. I mean, the reverse is also true, but oil paint really allows you to build up layers of color, I think, that help, that can represent volume in a way that I find really special. Yeah, so I think it's just sort of like a technicality, the materiality of the paint I enjoy. Yeah.
Thank you. Is it easier, or I sometimes see artists who are doing figurative work who use oil. Is there something about painting like the human form with oil that's different?
Well, painting the human form, you mean as opposed to painting?
Painting, using oil to paint like a figurative work versus using acrylic.
Oh, I think so. I think so because you can't. It's more difficult to use an underpainting with acrylic and to build up layers. Oil paint can be a little bit more translucent. It can be as thin as you want to make it. It can be super thick. It takes longer to dry, so you have a few days to keep working in colors if you want to. It's a more flexible medium, I think, and it has more traditional pigments as well, so it tends to lend itself to more traditional flesh tones. Yeah.
Hello. I was wondering if there were any figures throughout art history or more contemporary times that really inspire your work or you really love or anything like that.
I think the first figurative artist that really inspired my work was Jenny Saville, who makes like very fleshy paintings, really bodily nudes. I remember seeing her work like maybe 15 years ago and wanting to be able to create something like that. Her paintings are a little bit grotesque. Sometimes I go there too, but I think so. She's a big one. In terms of a more contemporary painter, right now I'm really interested in the work of Sasha Gordon, who is a very young artist. I think she's like in her mid-20s, but she's creating really interesting, somewhat distorted figurative work that uses really special bright colors. So I guess those are kind of two bookends artists that I love.
Do we have, oh, right here.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, like, I know artists have their own, like, meaning behind their work, and most of the time it can differ from the audience's view. What would you want your audience to, like, view your art and, like, depict it? Like, is it different than how you would want it to be viewed, or, like, kind of like that thought?
Like, how would I want people to view the work?
Yeah, like, if you didn't have this artist talk, or, like, people just walked in one day, how would you want this exhibit to be viewed?
I think my goal is always for people to see themselves in the work, in some aspect of the work. My hope is that someone will look at an image and feel a resonance, either of something that they've felt or they've thought, or they hadn't quite articulated, and then maybe the painting can help them articulate it, either emotionally or conceptually. So I think even if they think about something completely different than what I was thinking about when I made it, if there's some sort of harmony there, then that feels like a success to me.
Hi Zoe,
Hi.
I have a quick question just about, is there a special ritual that you practice before you continue your art making that kind of gets you into the zone of creating something?
Let's see. I'm not sure if there is a special ritual. I do like to paint in the morning when my energy is the most still. But I think just having a tidy space and a good podcast is probably the most ritual that I have.
Oh, one more over here.
Zoe, I noticed that in some of your more recent paintings, you've got backgrounds with white dots on black, and there's a lot of that. And I'm just wondering why. Is it that it adds depth? Do you like the contouring? And is any of this reflective of your mother's use of dots in her work?
I 100% ripped that technique from my mom's painting, which is a big part of this too. You know, the generational aspect of that technique is part of the show in a big way, I think. Yeah, since I was a kid, my mom has made paintings with lots of tiny little dots in them. Not always paintings, but more painting on objects or the stairs or the ceiling or the door in our house. There's a lot of dots. So a few years ago, I think in 2017, I decided to try it. And compared to doing figurative painting, which feels like I'm doing some sort of complicated, I don't know, calculus or something to build up volume, doing the dots just feels like binary, like 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. It's a completely different way to paint, and I fell in love with it. And once I started doing it, I enjoy how it can feel like a super zoomed out perspective or a super zoomed in perspective, depending on how you think about it. I like that they look like stars a little bit, maybe a little bit like particles interacting with each other, and they kind of create organic shapes within the dots. So.
All right, well, I want to thank everyone again for your wonderful questions and taking the opportunity to listen. So we will, you're welcome to look around, keep asking Zoe questions. We also have refreshments that are making upstairs. And please join me in a round of applause for the artists.
Thank you very much.